Hi, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, a controversial transportation project in the North County got the green light today, but there may be roadblocks ahead.
And the number of San Diego police officers reaches its lowest point in more than a decade. The police chief's response and the impact on public safety. I'm Peggy Pico. Also coming up, Robin Williams' death and suicide awareness, local resources, and what to say and do to help prevent suicide.
And we'll tell you about a program to get inner city kids involved in conservation. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Commuters traveling between San Diego and Oceanside can expect to see more lanes added to Interstate 5 in the coming decades. The State Coastal Commission today approved a major transportation project. Our North County editor, Allison St. John, has been following the controversial project. She joins us from the newsroom. So tell us about the plan and why it was so important.
Well, the Coastal Commission voted unanimously, and their approval was one of the last major hurdles to a plan that will guide the future expansion up the coastline for the next 40 years. It's a $6 billion plan that spans 27 miles from La Jolla to Oceanside. It includes adding 4 express lanes to Interstate 5. Now, cars and light trucks reportedly generate 40% of greenhouse gases in the region, so environmental groups argued passionately that the plan does nothing to address climate change because it's a car-first model of transport. They fought vigorously for investing in expanding the railway line down the coast instead, with more modern and less polluting trains.
So, Allison, will the rail line get any money to expand?
Well, yes. $1 billion of the $6 billion will go to adding a second track to the railway line. And there'll also be miles more bike paths and money spent to increase access to the lagoons and the beaches. The building trades are pleased with this decision because they'll get about $1 billion in wages over the next 4 decades. A spokesman said the building roads and rail lines could help employ people left out of work after San Onofre shut down.
You said this has been a long time coming. Any more hurdles for the project?
Well, this was, in fact, the last hurdle from the Coastal Commission, but environmental groups have won a court judgment from the Secretary of State, Kamala Harris, saying that this plan does not address California's law requiring a reduction in greenhouse gases. But Caltrans officials appear confident that today's ruling means money can continue to flow into road widening.
KPBS North County editor, Allison St. John. State lawmakers have reached a tentative agreement on a water bond to replace the one on the November ballot. Part of the $7.5 billion deal will go to water storage projects. Some critics, like the Sierra Club, are opposed to how the storage money is being allocated.
That money, as the language is currently written, would not be, the storage money would not be fairly available for groundwater storage. It wouldn't be available to coastal areas up and down the state. In other words, it's specifically written for a few special interest projects that won't solve the water supply problem now and likely not in the future.
Lawmakers are expected to vote on the deal tonight. A California judge has ordered school districts to teach non-English speaking students. The decision comes after reports found at least a quarter of all districts are failing to do so. Several county school districts top the list of underperforming schools, including Grossmont Union. State and federal law require schools to teach English learners. Income inequality has been at the forefront of the national conversation during the recovery from the Great Recession. Our media partner iNewsSource used census data to find neighborhoods here with the highest and lowest incomes. Joining us to talk about the findings is Leo Castaneda. What did you find from the census information, Leo?
I found that East Village in downtown San Diego is a neighborhood with the highest income inequality in the county. The smallest income inequality was in the Chula Vista suburb of East Lake.
And how specifically did you use this information?
Well, I used the Census Bureau data and Census Reporter to find the Gini coefficient. That's a number that measures how much income inequality there is in an area. Normally, economists use that number to compare inequality across countries. I used it to compare zip codes in the county, adjusting for things like really small neighborhoods.
And why does East Village have such high income inequality?
Well, one of the biggest challenges downtown faces is the lack of affordable housing. One specific intersection I looked at was Market and 13th Street. On one corner, there are brand new luxury apartments with a gym, pool, computers, anything you could want. And right across the street, there's construction for the Alpha Square, those apartments being built by the Alpha Project for homeless and low-income residents. Their big amenities are bathrooms and showers in each apartment.
Yeah, huge contrast. Is San Diego City Council doing anything to address this issue?
I talked to Council President Todd Gloria. He told me he considers income inequality one of the main barriers to San Diego's greatness. Recent measures like the minimum wage increase could help. Gloria also says the city should be more aggressive in recruiting new businesses to the city. Still, downtown seems to be on a path towards higher income inequality, and it's hard to see that reversing anytime soon. For an interactive map to see the income inequality in your neighborhood, go to kpbs.org.
iNewsSource reporter Leo Castaneda. Public safety and slower response times are top concerns as recruitment and retention of San Diego police officers hit a new low. Peggy Pico has more on the law enforcement challenges.
The San Diego Police Officers Association report found 1,651 full-duty SDPD officers are responsible for the public safety of nearly 1.3 million people living in San Diego, making it the lowest number of patrol officers in more than a decade. My guest, Brian Marvel, president of the San Diego Police Officers Association, joins me with more on the issue and possible solutions. Brian, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, per capita, how does our staffing here in San Diego compare to police departments in other cities?
Actually, if you look nationwide, we're extremely low. We're usually around 1.2. Nationwide, the average usually fluctuates from 2 to 4 officers per 1,000.
And specifically, I know San Francisco, which is a little smaller than this, they actually have a pretty large ratio.
Yeah, they actually have, I believe, closer to 3 officers per 1,000. In their charter, it actually mandates that they're supposed to be around 2,400 officers. The city of San Diego doesn't have that same stipulation.
San Diego Police Chief Shelley Zimmerman says that pending retirements are only going to make matters worse.
True. Right now, we have 400 officers who could retire today. You go out a couple, 3 years, it winds up being almost 800 officers per that can leave at this time, and that's a serious issue.
Yeah, and let's hear what Shelley Zimmerman had to say about that as well.
Okay.
We are either very young and inexperienced, or we're very experienced with about, as of today, 400 officers are eligible to retire. And so what I can tell you is that we do move our officers that are working patrol from one area to another area, and we are often below what our recommended staffing is on a daily, nightly basis when we go out in patrol.
So there's some pending concerns there, but what are some of the other reasons for the department's low numbers?
Compensation is clearly the driving issue that we believe it is now. There are agencies within the county that are paying substantially more. When officers don't have to move and all they're doing is changing their uniform color, it makes it even easier, and they're reducing their commute costs as well.
Chief Zimmerman also told us the department's low staffing is actually having an impact on response times. Let's listen to what she has to say there.
We're still doing a very good job is to reduce our violent crime, and that's always going to be the focus to make sure the city is safe. But when we talk about the quality of life issues, I get an earful from the public that they don't see our officers as often as they did before, and that we're not addressing as quickly as we once did our quality of life issues, and we're not giving that extra service that we used to be able to do as far as maybe doing a crime prevention at a survey at their house right when that burglary happens.
So she's talking about quality of life issues. How is the problem actually impacting, or is it impacting, public safety?
It definitely is. The auditor just recently conducted a report on our patrol operations. At a minimum, just to answer radio calls, and those are the calls that come into communication, requires 646 officers. As of today, we have 641. So our officers are literally going from call to call to call to call. That's not a way.
And
to
that
police.
641 is at any given time on any given
Right.
shift. That's
Absolutely.
how they're divided about that. She mentioned also about these quality of life issues that aren't being addressed. Can you just rattle off a few of what that really means?
Like we used to have the community-oriented policing where we would address vandalism, graffiti, prowlers coming around. We'd be able to spend some time with a homeowner and say, these are the things that you can do to protect your house. If you see vandalism, call in here, do that. Those are not really being done anymore.
The city just raised the police department's budget by $4 million for police academies and $3.2 million for raises. Why isn't that enough?
Well, the $3.2 million actually went to a program that we modified within our own contract where the officers took money from one area and moved it to another. So in the reality, what was happening is the city's bringing it back, our old program, our holiday pay program. The $4 million for the additional money for the academy is great because we're increasing the amount of recruits that we'll get. Last year we lost more officers than we recruited. We probably will do the same this year depending on attrition.
What's the solution?
We really would like the city council and the mayor to possibly reopen our contract or implement certain steps in the next couple years that will address the public safety issues and mainly the compensation package that we currently have.
Do you think that the city council and the mayor would be on board for opening up these negotiations, specifically regarding salary?
I think after a salary survey is being conducted, it's supposed to be the end of September, early October. I think when they see the numbers are as low as we believe they're going to be, I think there will be a lot more pressure for them to actually do something about it.
All right, Brian Marvel with the San Diego Police Officers Association. Thank you.
Thank you.
In part 2 of her series, KPBS investigative reporter Amita Sharma talks to two of the lawyers who helped set Sara Kruzan free. She was convicted of killing her pimp and spent 20 years in prison.
Perkins Coie partner Ron McIntyre has worked on scores of civil cases involving plane crashes, asbestos claims, and personal injury over his 27-year career. But it's his pro bono representation of Sara Kruzan that stands out.
You know, two of the happiest days of my life were, sorry about this. I mean, besides the birth of my children and my marriage, I mean, of my professional life, I should say, was the day we did her parole hearing, and the parole board announced that they were going to advocate for her to be released. And then the other was the day I found out she got out.
Kruzan, who lived in San Diego for a time when she was a child, killed her pimp, Gigi Howard, in Riverside when she was 16. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Kruzan met Howard at 11. He raped her at 13 and forced her into prostitution. Perkins Coie took on the Kruzan case in 2007.
This pimp had targeted her, taken advantage of her, groomed her for prostitution, put her out on the streets, and when she finally snapped after years of abuse and shot him, she was sentenced to her entire life in prison and would never have the opportunity to come before a parole board. So to me, it was so obvious, and I felt sort of an instant connection to her story.
Melora Garrison was a new Perkins Coie associate at the time. She was one of 6 lawyers Perkins Coie assembled to work on the case. McIntyre says their first meeting with Kruzan at the women's prison in Chowchilla lasted 5 hours and was emotional.
For me, I think it was because I have daughters of my own, and I thought, close to her age, or who were her age at the time of her crime, and I thought, but for other circumstances, they could be here.
As they exited the prison, Garrison says the stakes hit her.
I had this moment of crushing anxiety, what if we invest all this time and all these resources and get her hopes up, and we don't get her out?
Optimism quickly replaced fear. Even though Kruzan was given a life sentence in 1995, McIntyre says the law allowed the court to give her the possibility of parole because she was a minor.
The sentencing error was pretty egregious, and no one in that courtroom knew what the law was as to the law that governed her sentencing, given her age.
The lawyers also believed they had grounds for a new trial. Garrison says Kruzan's defense lawyer never introduced evidence about the effects of her abusive childhood or that she had been a victim of violence by her pimp. Kruzan was the only person he put on the stand, and she was medicated.
The jury had no idea, other than a single mention of one night of prostitution, that she had been trafficked by this man throughout her life.
Nonetheless, over the next 7 years, efforts to get the case reopened were rejected by the Riverside Trial Court and Appeals Court. A clemency petition to former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger failed, but he did commute her sentence to life with the possibility of parole. The California Supreme Court sent the case back to Riverside. Garrison says the failures never hampered their faith, and Kruzan served as a huge motivator.
As a lawyer, you kind of think you either do good work and get the result that you want, or you don't. But I came to learn that this constant optimism and belief was actually really important to the outcome.
Ultimately, Kruzan's lawyers struck a deal with Riverside prosecutors to reduce her first-degree murder conviction to second-degree murder. She was freed for time served. Garrison says Kruzan's case epitomized what she had always thought being a lawyer meant.
Working on this case, I think, is just a really good example of how supremely important it is for lawyers to do public interest pro bono work.
All told, Perkins Coie donated $800,000 in legal services and spent $120,000 of its own money to win freedom for Kruzan. McIntyre says the experience made him even more cynical about the criminal justice system.
If a fraction of that had been put in at the front end, where she was originally tried and where there had been a proper preparation, if there had been a degree of reasonableness in the initial trial, but from all sides, not just on the defense side, that I think she would have ended up in the same place where we ended up all these years later, but with much less having been wasted in the meantime.
Now that the case is over and Kruzan is free and making plans to be a social worker, the lawyers remain connected to her.
Now it's fatherly concern, I guess, at this point. I want her to make the most of this opportunity.
Amita Sharma, KPBS News.
Connecting urban communities and youth to outdoor conservation is the goal of a federal initiative. The Secretary of the Interior came to San Diego to talk about the $1 million partnership with the local Fish and Wildlife Service.
This opportunity is one of the unique chances in our life to do something great with communities and nature.
Andy Ewan is the project leader for San Diego's Wildlife Refuge Complex, covering about 16,000 acres from San Diego to the South Bay and Tijuana Slough, where visitors can explore the amazing plants, animals, and birds found along our shore. Ewan is also responsible for getting $1 million a year from the federal government to create programs to inspire young people like Raul Lopez Gallo to serve and work outdoors.
For me, it's being outdoors, getting dirty, and actually helping the environment by removing invasive species and making a difference that you will be able to see in the later future.
He just graduated from high school with plans to study biology in college. Secretary of the Interior Sally Jewell says the federal goal is to get 10 million kids from underserved communities to embrace conservation and outdoor activities.
And connecting with nature and doing work on the land changes lives. How it puts careers on the radar that nobody ever thought about before. How it says you have a purpose. You have a purpose and a place in this ecosystem that can be inspirational to the people around you, and you can help change their lives.
80% of our U.S. population lives in cities. This is an opportunity to reconnect kids to nature, found right in their own backyard. Actor Robin Williams' death has led to a spike in calls to suicide hotlines. Peggy Pico talks to some experts about where you can go and what you can do to help prevent suicide.
According to the county's medical examiner database, there's been a slight but steady climb in suicides over the last few years, reaching 413 suicides in the county in 2012. Joining me with local resources and practical advice on how to help yourself or someone else are my guest, Piedad Garcia, Director of County Mental Health Services for Adults and Older Adults, and David Peters, a family therapist in San Diego. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, David, what are some of the warning signs that someone may be suicidal?
The most important warning sign is someone who's detaching themselves from relationships. when someone is considering suicide, they pull away from their loved ones and their friends. They'll be much more isolative. Of course, a severely depressed mood or a very agitated mood in men is a warning sign. Also, abuse of alcohol and drugs can increase the risk because there's an increase in the potential for recklessness then. Certainly, any previous attempt is an indicator that there's a higher likelihood currently. But then again, for some people, you just don't know. You don't get the sign.
Well, Piedad, what do you say to someone who you suspect, either through these signs or they tell you point blank that they're thinking about killing themselves?
I think one of the first things is acknowledging the fact that they have talked to you. It's very difficult for individuals who are feeling so much despair and suicidal to come out and reach out to an individual. So I think it's acknowledging that you're telling me, thank you for telling me, and how can I help? And where do I need to take you? What is it that you need from me now? And stay in the moment with the person. And I think that begins to really allow the individual to say, I need to be taken to a place, or I need to just talk and listen to that individual.
And let them hear that. What shouldn't you say? Are there certain things you shouldn't ask or say?
Don't say, oh, you really don't mean that. Oh, you really don't want to kill yourself. Don't minimize it. I think you have to, as an individual, as a family member, as a professional, you have to take it very seriously and assess and evaluate. Is there a means, if you're a professional, is there a means or an access to the means, and where do I need to take you for you to feel safe?
And David, is it okay to ask somebody point blank, do you have a plan? Do you have a way you're going to do this?
Certainly, if you think they are suicidal, it couldn't be a very important question to say, have you thought about how you would do it? Because if they say, yes, I've got the pills, or I was thinking of using a gun, or, yeah, I was driving on Coronado Bridge recently and thought about it. That's another indicator of the seriousness of it. If they have the inclination and then they have the thoughts of how, and if they have actually planned when, there's a very high likelihood they could act, and they need to be taken to a hospital then.
Well, Piedad, which population and age groups are at risk of suicide the most here in San Diego County?
The data shows males and individuals over the age of between 45 and 55 is a more predominant data that we have, but of course it affects females and males of all ages and all ethnic backgrounds and socioeconomic status. So, but the majority we see is around the middle age.
And why is that, David? Why middle-aged men, and what are some of the treatments available?
Well, my understanding is that it's become middle-aged men in recent years, and I think it has a lot to do with the change in the economy, a lot of men who are unable to get meaningful work, and it gives them a sense of meaninglessness or powerlessness if they're not able to provide for their family, if they're no longer able to work in their occupation. For men, their work is part of their identity, and if they're not working or if they're unable to, they can feel like they no longer have a purpose in life.
And let's touch on the treatment, because I know you've said in other conversations that basically, you know, men may not exhibit the same emotions as women. They may not look sad. Tell us about appropriate treatment.
Yes, appropriate treatment is critical. Many people, their first attempt at treatment is going to their primary care physician and saying, I just haven't felt like myself. I'm too tired. I don't have much get up and go. And the primary care physician means well, but he prescribes an antidepressant and says, come back in 4 weeks. It's really the worst alternative you can take in trying to start a mental health program, because most people then feel the side effects. They stop the medication. They say, well, I tried that and it didn't work. So what you want to do is go to a mental health professional first, a therapist, a psychologist, a family therapist. And that person can help walk you all the way through and stick with you and work with you on a weekly basis to get help. And maybe medications are a part of it, but you're not told to come back in 4 weeks and see if you feel better. So they need someone who sticks with them.
And Piedad, how do celebrity suicides like Robin Williams or this wall-to-wall media coverage when somebody kills themselves, how does it impact the risk of suicide?
In different ways. I think individuals that have had family members or friends that had completed suicide in the past, it revives those memories and that trauma. People that may feel a certain level of depression may feel more depressed. I think that it shocks and it impacts all of us because it's a loss. It's a tragedy.
Does it encourage people to do this who might have been thinking about it?
I don't know that it encourages. I think as responsible media outlets and professionals, I think that we're always cautious. I know we have had an increase in our calls, in our access and crisis line, and I think people are reaching out to for help, and that's good. So it's a very delicate balance in how we best approach that.
All right, well, we are out of time. So Piedad Garcia and David Peters, thank you so much. And I want to let folks know that for specifics on what to say and local resources to help yourself or others that are dealing with suicidal thoughts, go to up2sd.org on the web or call the county hotline. The number is on your screen, 1-888-724-7240. That's 1-888-724-7240.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, Iraq on the brink, the latest on the political turmoil and growing insurgency. That's Wednesday on the PBS News Hour.
Quick look at the forecast. Less humidity, a mix of sun and clouds along the coast over the next few days. Mid-70s mostly. A bit warmer for the inland valleys. Sunny, mid-80s. Similar temperatures in the mountains, but cooling into the low 60s at night. And the desert, plenty of sunshine, well above 100 degrees. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.